Hi, it's Tony. You're in Pop Pop's workshop, and we are working with Starbond for this project. They sent us their line, a couple of boxes of their mica powder, their new Z9 Performance Sanding Disc. These are awesome. And the 5-minute epoxy. Now, we had this board. You can see this beauty in front of us, but before, it needed some help. Had a big bark inclusion in here, which I thought it's a small fill. Why not try the 5-minute epoxy, see how that works for us? Spoiler alert, it worked great. Nana picked out a color. The mahogany red was, I think, a nice highlight to this, and did some really interesting things in that inclusion. So I really had fun working on this project. And big thanks to Starbond for being willing to sponsor this in our workshop. Great company to work with. So follow along as we take what was an okay board and turn it into what you see in front of you now. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how far it's come. All right, so as you saw, we were able to use our Irwin Marples chisels and our micro jig clamps to hold it down and clean out this inclusion. Give me a second and I'll bring you in. You can take a look at it. All right, so clean it out pretty good there. It's not going to be a big hole. Pardon me doing this one-handed. On this side a little bit deeper. Runs at an angle and up and under. So that'll be a good test for our Starbond 5-minute epoxy. Got to still pick out a color and we can get that filled. And then maybe have to top it off. We'll see how it goes, and we'll get into that next. All right, so the bark inclusion is out. This is a sample of the handles we're going to use on the serving board. And here are our choices for the powders to mix in our epoxy. And we're trying to figure out which one to use. Or maybe we use two, one on each side, do a small fill on one side, fill another. Many choices, so we're not quite sure yet, but keep watching the video. You'll find out which one we picked. Okay, so we've got our color chosen. We've got the inclusion out. Now it's time to mix up the epoxy. We've chosen the Starbond 5-minute epoxy. They were kind enough to send us this along with the mica powders. So we're going to mix our epoxy up. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. Some might say, well, this is just an adhesive, but I really believe it's going to do excellent. This isn't a really large fill here, a couple ounces. So we'll mix up in this so we can peel it out later. And normally you'd put it on this palette if you're going to use it as an adhesive, but we're going to use it to fill. So we'll mix it up in here, a couple ounces, mix our powder in, stir it up, get it in there because it's a quick setter. So I'm banking on being able to get to planing this board in just a little bit because we're using the Starbond. So we're going to get right to that. All right, well, not quite sure what happened to the video that I just, the part of the video I just did showing me mixing that up and putting it in, but it must have gotten corrupted somehow. So that's the end product. We've got it mixed up and put in there. I like the color. It was fairly easy to work with. It looks like it's going to do great by the time I get that planed off there, and you'll really be able to see the chatoyance in that part of the board is beautiful. So hopefully that shows through on the video. I don't know that it will, but unfortunately I got the taping, I've got the end result, but I've lost the video of everything in between. So I guess that happens when you're doing footage, but there's the end product. Next up, we'll let that dry and cure out, and then we'll be planing the board to get it to its final thickness, and then we'll be on to sanding. All right, so that went well, planing that down. We did find a couple voids here that we're going to have to deal with, so we're going to take some clear CA glue and the same mica powder. We're going to mix that up, fill in the voids, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay, so we finished our sanding. I got to say, these Z9 Performance Disc from Starbond, really, really good. They're very durable. They cut fast. They cut well. Did a nice job on this board, even on the edges. Did it with the, of course, the random orbit, but also on our little sanding mouse to get those edges just right. Even in the live edge areas, they worked a treat. So highly recommend those. Grab some if you need. I'm going to now use a little white pad, some Nana's wood gravy, and we're going to coat this board and get it buffed in, and then get a good look at what this is really going to look like when we get her done. Once I get her all lotioned up and ready for video, I'll bring you back in. We can see how this all turned out. Okay, so for those eagle-eyed viewers, I screwed up. It happens. I was so anxious to see how beautiful this board was, and let's take a look at that. That is a thing of beauty. That is amazing. That turned out so, so good. But I was so anxious to see how this showed up that, yeah, I put finish on before I was finished. I didn't drill my holes for my handles. I didn't drill the holes for my feet. I kind of botched it. So in the next part of the video, you're going to watch me trying to compensate for that. And fortunately, we've got a jig for the handles we are going to use, so matter of just finding center on this end, which is kind of squared up. This end got an angle. Gonna be a little bit of a trick to doing that one. So we'll figure it out. But follow along with my paint, if you will. We'll get to putting the handles on. Okay, so as you saw, we've got the jig, we've got the end holes drilled, ready to go. Now we're down here worrying about, we can't use the jig to square off of this funky end. So how do I deal with the live edge? I put my template, my jig, right back, centered up, squared up. I know from this line to the center of each of these holes is 2.5 inches each way. I use my framing square as the reference to bring that line, that center line, all the way down here, because once again, somebody screwed up and finished this. So that means tape or markings, just not going to work. So improvise. Now from this 21-inch mark, I'm going to measure over here 2.5 inches, punch a hole. I'll measure across this, over this way, 2.5 inches, punch a hole. Drill it, and we should be, for all reasonable purposes, square-ish, right? You can tell me in the comments how this is a horrible idea and I should have done it differently. And believe me, I know it's a horrible idea, but it's the best I've got at the moment. So I'm sure you've got some better ones. Put them in the comments. Let me know how goofy this really is. And next time I'll try to remember and not mess this up. But we'll see how this turns out. It's always an experiment, never a fail, just a learning experience, right? So on to drilling some holes again. See how the holes line up? So that's going to work. Quite an adventure, huh? Okay, wasn't maybe an adventure, but it was fun. Had some interesting challenges along the way that were self-inflicted, to be honest. So, but we got past them. We've got the beautiful copper handles on there. They're not really copper, but you get the point. And some feet on the bottom. Nice stability. I really got to say, the mica powders, the 5-minute epoxy was the right call for that bar conclusion. And just look at that. There's some chatoyance there. It might not show up on camera, but man, in the light, that just glistens and shines. It's a beautiful board. So hopefully you enjoyed coming along with us on this adventure to see just how to work through some problems. Maybe you do some of the same mistakes that I do, putting something together. And secret, I didn't even show you all of them. There were more. Shudder to think. But this turned out really well. I'm really happy with it. Starbond, as I said in the beginning, excellent company to work with. So if you haven't tried out their line of products, do so. I'm going to put a link in the descriptions to their products, especially these new Z9 Performance Sanding Discs. I was pleasantly surprised with the durability, how fast these things cut. It was great. They really took this thing to a beautiful, smooth finish. And I only went up to like 180 grit on there. I could have gone even further. So get yourself some of those sanding discs if you haven't already. Again, huge shout out to Starbond. Thank you so much for helping with the project. And as always, we appreciate the fact that you've taken your time to watch this video, all my mess ups, and hopefully you got a chuckle out of it and thinking, this guy's going to mess this up. But I didn't. It turned out okay. So hopefully you're enjoying not so many mess ups in your shop today. Get out there in the shop, enjoy the day, and remember, you can do this.